nobody knew what was happening. I didn't know what was happening. I couldn't believe it when I saw it, but there was a meetup. There was a series of meetups in the summer of 2013 of young entrepreneurs in Jerusalem that were trying to start startups. And I couldn't believe my eyes when I walked into the first meetup. And that was the moment that changed my life. I want to make it very clear. I am doing this to make you a lot of money. This is a supply-demand mismatch. I might look like the nicest person in the world. I might look like the most idealistic person in the world. And that's great if you think that. But I am doing this to exploit a mismatch of supply and demand for early stage capital in the capital of the startup nation. That's the pitch.
Ben Wiener, thank you for coming for our podcast. This is my first podcast in English, so my confession,
So far, you're doing great.
Is enough. Okay, so Ben, tell us about yourself a little bit before we're starting.
So I grew up in the United States, as you can tell, in Pennsylvania. Got married to my wife in New York, where we both lived. I went to law school in New York at Columbia, but we both wanted to make Aliyah, to move to Israel, preferably at a younger age. We didn't want to wait too long. So we moved to Israel permanently in 1998 to Jerusalem here. I went to law school understanding that I probably wanted to use it as a springboard to get into business. I didn't think that Israel needed another smart Jewish lawyer from New York. So I wanted to use law as a training ground to learn transactions and deals, and then hopefully come here and find my way into startups is really what I wanted to do. I clerked on the Israeli Supreme Court for a year after law school, so we got to live here for a year, which was fun and got us sort of integrated into the Jerusalem scene as a young couple. Went back to New York, practiced corporate law for about a year and a half, and then we made Aliyah in 1998. And by 1999, I had left law and joined my first startup in Jerusalem, a small software company in the .com days. And I loved it. I was, in charge of business development. So I was using my, short legal background to do the deals for the company while they built the software. And I thought,
founder?
I was a co-founder. Yeah. Just, connected with another entrepreneur who, it was his idea. I was just brought on to be his second, in command and be in charge of the deals while they built the company. That company did not work out. But I liked the activity of interacting with the investors and interacting with the companies that we were trying to do partnerships with. And I thought that's what I would do for the rest of my life here in Israel. What happened was that whole activity in Jerusalem in the late 90s and early 2000s basically evaporated in around 2002 when the dot-com bubble burst and the second intifada broke out. There was pretty much a wipeout of the early stage startups in Jerusalem. There were some larger companies that survived that, like Mobileye and NDS and Ex Libris. But pretty much many, if not all, of the smaller startups disappeared. The funding disappeared. And the investors, I think, felt that Tel Aviv was the only place to be, or the exclusive place to be, to do something big in Israel. As a result, for about a decade or more, there wasn't a lot of activity, early stage activity in Jerusalem. There were a few exceptions, but very, very few. You could count them like on one hand. So I spent that part of my career, the next decade, from about 2002 to about 2013, just kind of bouncing around in Jerusalem, trying to figure out how to make a living and find my way professionally until the opportunity that we're going to talk about kind of presented itself in the summer of 2013. And
you didn't think maybe to move to Tel Aviv?
Everything was on the table. I thought about, working in Tel Aviv. I actually worked overseas for a couple of years, traveling back and forth to Europe, setting something up. So I was open to pretty much anything. And I tried a bunch of different things. They didn't really work out. And then in 2013, I was fortunate to stumble into one of the early meetups of the new Jerusalem scene, which nobody knew what was happening. I didn't know what was happening. I couldn't believe it when I saw it, but there was a meetup. There was a series of meetups in the summer of 2013 of young entrepreneurs in Jerusalem that were trying to start startups. And I couldn't believe my eyes when I walked into the first meetup. And that was the moment that changed my life, because I understood instantly that the very few investors that might have known that it was going on wouldn't be paying attention or wouldn't have believed it. And the investors in Tel Aviv were quite busy with the incredible volume of activity that they were seeing in Tel Aviv. And I thought that there was an opportunity for somebody to come into the Jerusalem scene with a little bit of capital and become like the early stage investor for this new Jerusalem renaissance. It was a big gamble. Most investors thought I was crazy. Most of the wealthy people I went to ask for money said no. I understood them. It was incredibly risky to say, I'm going to create a venture capital fund in Jerusalem to only invest in Jerusalem companies where nothing good has happened in 12 years. And oh, by the way, I have no track record of doing this. So I understood why people were skeptical. I thought more investors would give me the benefit of the doubt, but they did not. And I was just very, very lucky to raise a very small amount of money for my first fund, which became one of the most successful funds in the world for that vintage. When Breezometer sold, which was one of my first investments, to Google for $200 million, I returned that entire first fund many times over. And that first fund is now top decile, like in the world for its vintage, because it's the law of small numbers. When you raise a small fund, you don't have to return a ton of money for it to be incredibly valuable. But thank God, like I was able to reward those investors that trusted me or believed in me in the beginning. And that set off a chain reaction of events that enabled Jumpspeed to become, now over $50 million under management, still investing exclusively in early stage companies in Jerusalem. But now I can do it in at a bigger scale.
There are other VCs that say we are going just to Jerusalem.
There are very few VCs in the world that will focus on one city. It's considered to be very strange.
Maybe from, Zionists or something like this, no?
Yeah, I never ever pitched it as a Zionist idealistic mission. And anytime any of my investors, I've raised money from over 100 investors.
Yes.
I don't want them to think about it that way. Even if they do, I stop them and say, hey, I want to make it very clear. I am doing this to make you a lot of money. This is a supply-demand mismatch. I might look like the nicest person in the world. I might look like the most idealistic person in the world. And that's great if you think that. But I am doing this to exploit a mismatch of supply and demand for early stage capital in the capital of the startup nation. That's the pitch. And I've already proven it. Like, we've already been able to get into really world-class startups that eventually become just exceptional category-defining companies in their field, like Breezometer, like Fullpath, like NeuroCare, like Lidwave. And I was able to invest in all those companies because they started in Jerusalem at relatively lower valuations. And that's a benefit to my investors. So yeah, I feel like we're doing something good for the world, but that's only the cherry on the top. That's not the motivator. The motivator is pure capitalism to make money for the investors that have trusted me with their money, because that's what this business is about. And if it feels good on top of it, yeah, it's amazing that I've invested in, 1/3 of the companies I've invested in were founded or led by a woman. That's crazy. That's wildly different than even Silicon Valley or anywhere else in the world. I feel great about that. But that's not why I'm doing it. That's a benefit to investing in one of the most diverse and exciting ecosystems in the world that's still undercovered and not completely exposed. And we're trying to change that. We're trying to do what we can to bring more exposure to Jerusalem. But on the other hand, I'm benefiting as an investor from it continually not being fully exposed, because once I get into a company, then we can help expose it at the next rounds to the bigger investors. And we have some of the best VCs in Israel and even in America that have invested in Jumpspeed companies afterwards. But at the beginning, they would not have seen them because they were too small and too off market.
The second VC? Or?
Yeah, so now I'm already managing my third fund. So I've been able to raise multiple funds after that first one that was so hard. It's still hard, but I was able to, show new investors a little more of a track record and speak a little more intelligently about what I was doing by about 2017, 2018. So thankfully, thank God. And I'm so grateful to my investors who have trusted me with their capital from around the world. Many of them are not Jewish. These are people that never thought that they'd ever invest in Israel, but they were introduced to me by somebody, who said to them, hey, you should meet this guy, Ben. He's got something really interesting. And I'm very grateful to them. And thankfully, I've been able to make a bunch of them, a lot of money. And I hope to make the rest of them a lot of money and feel good while doing it. So it wasn't easy, but like I said, I started with less than $1 million. It was impossible to raise more than that in 2013, 2014. And now, like I said, I've been able to raise over 50 million for this one,
So the second
thesis.
One, what is the size of the second one?
So the first one was under $1 million. I ended up adding a little bit to it. Let's call it about 3 million total for that first fund. Eventually, that was all returned so far to those investors plus profit. My first real fund, my second fund, but my first real one was in 2017. That was about a $17.5 million fund. And the new one, which I closed during the war, which was very difficult, is about a $22.5 million fund. So still very, very small by venture capital standards, but significant for this ecosystem.
You're looking for early stages, so it's okay.
Yeah, we're the lead investor almost every time in the first. We're almost always the first check that a startup gets. I want to see the startup before it has money, before it has a product.
So you're looking for, but you're looking for match something, or you are the sort of one with the first check?
I want to be the lead check if I can in that pre-seed round, that first safe or whatever that is, getting the company off the ground. 2 people, a dog, and an idea in a garage. That's what I want to see. And a lot of investors want to wait a little bit longer. So that's good. I don't claim to be right every time. I can't be right every time, but I do believe that I have a framework for looking at these things that is going to get us above average chances of picking correctly. So in a room of 100 startups where each one of them is, 2 weird people, a dog, and an idea, I believe I have a way to pick a subset of those, like 2 or 3 of those out of 100 that have much better chances of success, even though they all look a little strange at the beginning. Nothing looks perfect at the beginning. So, and when I see one of those, I do that between 2 and 4 times a year in Jerusalem. So there's hundreds of opportunities here. I'll invest in about 1% of what I see. But that 1% of the time, I believe that I've seen the characteristics of, product, market, and team that are, way above average and that have the best chance of success. I know that they won't all succeed, but as long as a few of them do, we will be rewarded, financially. And that's the game. So I've been able to show that I have a good chance of doing that over the last 12 years. And thankfully, investors have continued to back the project.
What about a follow-on investment? Do you have reserve for this?
Yeah. So I have a reserve methodology of about 1-to-1. So anytime I make an early investment in a company, I will tell them I've reserved about equal amount of money for you for the next rounds, assuming that we're able to raise the next rounds. And I get very, very involved in like 2 things with these companies. I don't promise them the world. I promise them 2 things. I'm going to be your go-to advisor or helper on product market fit. Your goal is to get as quickly to product market fit as possible, and I will be your Sherpa or your guide to try to help you. I won't be able to give you all the answers, but I'll be there to help you, push you to get to that product market fit. And number 2, I will be very, very involved in your next round of financing. I will help either introduce you to the investors because I have relationships with them, or at the very least help you prepare your pitch so that you can make the best pitch to the next investors. Your pitch might have been not perfect and worked on me, but it has to be perfect to work on the next round. And I've written a lot about pitching, and we can talk about that, but I have a lot to say about optimal pitching of early stage startups. So I get very involved in those 2 things. And thankfully, we've been successful many times in helping these early stage companies get to the next round and the next round after that. In many cases, I've been the one who introduced them to the next round investor. In many cases, they find them on their own, and I just help them, present. But those are the 2 roles where I get incredibly involved. And everything else that I can provide is extra. Like if I can, I do it, but I don't promise. I think VCs get a little bit arrogant or a little bit too ahead of themselves when they say that they add a lot of value. I want to invest in people who are the experts in their field. And because I trust them and know that they have a very good chance of doing it on their own, I just want to be the trusted advisor to them to help them get where they believe they can go. If I'm adding too much value, they're probably in big trouble because it means that they can't do basic things on their own. So it's a very sensitive balance, I think, for VCs to be adding value, but not dictating or getting in the way or bossing the entrepreneurs around. So I'm going to default trust. If I've invested in them, if they're one of the 1% of companies that I saw that got my money, it means that I trust them a lot. And they have to do a lot to lose that trust. As long as I trust them to be making very good decisions. And I'm just there to speak to them every couple of days or every week, just to guide them or double check what they're doing. It's much more of a sensitive balance.
How much companies?
So again, I'm only investing in between 2, sometimes 1 to 4 companies, new companies a year. So the active portfolio, you can see it on the website, is, after a few years, is only about a dozen companies that I'm actively involved with, because some of them fail pretty quickly. The ones that fail pretty quickly. So they're out. The ones that succeed take off in a way where there are much bigger VCs involved, and I go back into the jungle. I go back into kindergarten, whatever. I don't want to be demeaning to the founders, but like I go back to that early stage, and I'm staying with those companies that are in the portfolio that are early, and I'm hoping that they can graduate to high school and university or whatever, and get to the big funds who will take them further. And then I drop back. I'll always be their friend. I'll always be involved, but not.
Don't see them every week.
I'm not nearly as involved in Full Path anymore. I mean, Full Path, I invested in them over 10 years ago when they were 3 people, 4 people, and an idea. Mm-hmm. Now it's a company of 250 people around the world. They've raised tens and tens of millions of dollars. They have private equity in the company. Like they don't need me talking to them every week. They've graduated from they got way past, they're much more sophisticated than I can help them with. And that's amazing. And we're going to do very, very well, but they don't need me as much, and I can't offer as much. So that's a case, or Breezometer as well, where when they got to the point where they could get acquired by Google for hundreds of millions of dollars, of course I was very friendly with them, but I wasn't giving them the active weekly guidance. They had very, very sophisticated people on the board at that point.
What the size of checks?
So I'm usually investing, the sweet spot for jump speed is between $500,000 to $1 million at inception, and equal that same amount reserved for reserves. Plus we've done a bunch of SPV, special purpose vehicle follow-on. So there are companies where we've invested over $2 million already just in one company, between the initial investment and the reserve investment from the fund, and then SPVs afterwards. So we're capable of, continuing to back a successful company for a few rounds. And by then, they're not reliant on us anymore. They're in the hands of much bigger VCs who can carry them further.
So let's talk about what you are looking for. In general, you talk about all the story and all the pitch deck and all this.
Yeah.
But before this, or the presentation and all this, what you are looking for in the investors, they need to be something to go outside of Israel,
Yeah.
to be globally.
Of course.
And
Yeah.
from the beginning, or you want them to do some pilot in Israel and then go?
Exactly how they get to the outside world is up to them. In some cases, a pilot here is helpful. In some cases, a pilot here doesn't mean enough because it's not indicative enough about what the rest of the world looked like. I had a company in my past that was very successful here in Israel, and for whatever reason could not get traction outside of Israel. So they had a lot of very positive activity early on among Israeli partners, and then it failed because it didn't work internationally. So I'll still never know whether it was, was it a problem with the founders that they were not able to sell globally? Was it something about the product that jived well with the Israeli customer but didn't work? So, it's fine to do a pilot here in Israel if we believe that it signals what the outside world will want. But sometimes it's not as meaningful. So the actual path that they take to getting to the outside world is up to them. But it has to be designed.
For global team, or if it's very, very Israeli team, they say we will hire the right person to go to the outside. Do you believe this?
Probably not enough. The founder, or he or she or they, need to be able to tell me pretty early how this is going to work overseas and why they think it will work overseas. By the way, in Jerusalem, we have a lot of Olim, so it's not by chance that I would say about a third of my founders in the portfolio are people that came from other countries. So they are very familiar with what goes on in the outside world because they, like me, they're olim from outside of Israel. So it's not hard to get them to talk about how this could work in the outside world because they still have one foot in the outside world. But I've invested in pure Israeli founding teams.
For example, two Haredis, it came to you and say, and even don't know any English.
So that's a problem. Listen, I've been extremely involved in the Haredi entrepreneurship space because there's a lot of that happening here in Jerusalem. I have not yet invested in a Haredi founded entrepreneur company. I would love to. I just haven't found one yet that met my criteria. I work with the local Haredi accelerators, and I'm very supportive of them. And I think that one day we will see something that will come out of there that will meet my criteria. But that is something that holds them back. I mean, I could tell you some heartbreaking stories. There was one Haredi founder who came to me, and he pitched me on a company, and it was in Hebrew. And at some point I said to him, okay, this is very interesting, but I have a feeling that this exists in the outside world. He goes, well, I know it doesn't exist in Israel. I said, well, what about the outside world? And he said, well, I don't read English, so I can't even search on Google to see if it exists outside. And I said, well, you realize that really is going to hold you back. He said, well, I plan to get a partner who speaks and reads English to help me, research this in the outside world. I said, yeah, but you're going to have to give him or her like half your company just because you don't read English. And does that bother you? And he said, yeah, he's struggling with it. And he and his wife are trying to figure out what to do with their children who are in the Haredi, educational system and not learning English. And he now realizes that just the basic STEM education is holding him back. I don't know what happened to him. I assume that it did not get off the ground because he was too handicapped. But English is generally, even an Israeli who didn't spend time overseas, typically knows enough English to be able to figure out what's happening in the outside world. And I've invested in a number of teams that were pure Israeli, not Olim, who figured out very, very quickly and were able to explain to me very quickly how it was going to work overseas. And that's the bare minimum that I need to see and understand.
So you said that you are trying to make more money for the investors, for your investor, but
I'm a venture capitalist. So capitalist means that I'm a capitalist, right?
For sure, it's the right way. But your added value is Jerusalem, or your uniqueness, it's Jerusalem. So what is in Jerusalem? What is so special in Jerusalem? It's just for differentiation, or you say that you have something in Jerusalem that you say, I rather this investment than in the center, let's say?
I want to be careful about the way I explain it because I think people misunderstand it when I say it. I really have nothing against the Tel Aviv ecosystem. And again, I interact with the Tel Aviv investors all the time. Many of them have invested in my companies in the next round. But they're not here doing what I'm doing. They're not here looking for those two people and a dog and an idea in Jerusalem. It's just not worth their time. It's not worth their effort. They don't necessarily know how to navigate. They don't have the interest or the resources to look at 100 early stage founders in Jerusalem and pick one that they like. I have the energy and the interest and the ability to do that. And they're more than happy for me to do that at that initial round and take that initial risk and then bring it to them at the next round. So my interest in Jerusalem is not idealistic. It's just opportunistic. It's just a weird mismatch of supply and demand where from 2002 to 2013, the investors in Tel Aviv were right. There wasn't a lot going on here. So it made sense for them not to look here. But when things changed in 2013 and 2014, and there were a few hundred entrepreneurs at the Hebrew University, at different accelerator programs, Olim, all these different sources of people trying to start new startups, I felt that was an opportunity where 2 or 3 or 4 world-class startups would come out of that activity. Maybe not more, but I didn't need more. I just needed 2 or 3 or 4 to have a business, to pick them. And I knew that the Tel Aviv investors probably wouldn't be interested in doing all that work. There's so much going on in Tel Aviv. There's thousands of opportunities. If you're a Tel Aviv investor, you don't need...
It's a red ocean.
Yeah, you don't need, but
if it's all success, why there is no competition there?
there is competition. I think it's foolish to claim we live in an open society. Like I never claimed that I would be the only one forever. I claimed to my investors that I would be first, and that by being first, I would continue to have an advantage even if other investors did come. I wanted other investors to come. It doesn't sound credible for me to say after 12 years that there's nobody else looking at these things. So now, thank God, there are other investors that live here in Jerusalem, that bump into opportunities that I see sometimes. So I have to, as a competitor, I have to be very collaborative, which is weird. Like I want to be friends with the other investors, even if we're quote unquote competing for the same deals, because there's usually room alongside one another. Like I've tried to get some of these other investors to invest alongside me, and sometimes they do. Like I'm not trying to block out anybody or to have an exclusive vacuum sealed hold on this ecosystem. I want to be friendly and collaborative. There's always room for us to co-invest. And if one of my friends scoops me on one of the interesting companies in this city, that's amazing. There's going to be 3 or 4 or 5 other ones this year. I'll get them. Like there's enough to go around between 2 of us or 3 of us. So I don't see competition as something that has to be violent or like a battle. I see it as actually being collaborative. And I actually try to be friendly and warm to the other investors that are here, because I want them to invest alongside me when I see something good, or at least, at the next round. So the short answer is, even as there is more competition, I tend to be further ahead. I'm here every day. Those investors are still going to Tel Aviv 2-3 times a week or more. I'm still doing the work in the evenings, going to events where I'm still, unfortunately, often the only investor that shows up at a Jerusalem, meetup for entrepreneurs. And I don't mind like doing that work with my backpack and missing dinner with my wife, once a week, if I have to be out there in the community, trying to meet that next, needle in a haystack. So again, it's a function of being first, also being faster, also being more underground and plugged into certain relationships here that I think still gives me a competitive advantage, even though I welcome other competition to come in.
So what are the fields that you are invested in?
So I have to be agnostic to industry because I'm so specific on geography. I can't be too picky about types of things because I really have to see everything that goes on in the city. Having said that, there are certain things that are just too complicated for a former lawyer to figure out. And I think many of us in the traditional VC space are like that, where we don't do like pharmaceutical, drug development, anything that's too deeply medical will typically be handled by specialist investors.
Not deeply medical, it's in your field.
Anything that's not deeply medical, I'll still do. I did Genetica Plus, which became NeuroCare. It's fantastic medical technology, but they're not FDA. They're not developing drugs. It's a test for medications, for other molecules, to match them with patients. So I've done a few personalized medicine things where it's less FDA clinical trial, phase 1, phase 2. That's just outside of the realm of what I can typically do.
It's very hard to say Jerusalem without medical, no.
Yeah, and there's a vibrant side of Jerusalem that I purposely don't touch. I try to be supportive of it. We didn't talk about it, but I'm also very active in Made in JLM, which is the Amuta, the nonprofit that sort of services the whole Jerusalem ecosystem. So through that nonprofit, I want to support and help all of the startups in Jerusalem and see them grow. But for jump speed, it probably won't be something that we will get involved in, just because I don't trust my own ability to navigate pharma, deep, drug development, things like that. The other field that we don't see a lot of, which is extremely popular in Israel, is cybersecurity. So it just turns out that most cyber startups are in the Merkaz or in Beersheba.
But it's not under your umbrella, or you say I'm not see enough?
I don't see enough. I would definitely look at a cyber startup that came from Jerusalem, but in 11 or 12 years, I haven't seen really more than a few that came out of here, and they weren't typical cyber startups. I think that the traditional cyber entrepreneurs know how to find the 4 or 5 or 6 amazing early stage. And they just go right to them. They don't pass through Jerusalem. And I'm fine with that. I think that cybersecurity for me is like drug development. That it all sounds amazing, and therefore I know that I don't know how to analyze it. So, but thank God I haven't really been tested too much because we don't see a lot of it in Jerusalem. And there's, like I said, there's 200, 300, 400 other opportunities a year that are all super interesting. Some of which are super interesting that I can sink my teeth into that don't have to be cyber. The fields that we do see clustering in Jerusalem are like 4 or 5 major buckets of activity that I think are most common in Jerusalem, which are classic, deep tech, a lot of laser, photonic, really deep hardware related things that come out of in and around the Hebrew University and other places. We have a lot of entrepreneurs in that space here. So I've done a fair amount of deep tech.
Look for deep technology, or looking for example, someone from the marketing side, or HR platforms, something like this. It's less interesting you.
Yeah, I would say marketing HR is less interesting to me because it's harder to develop a long-term competitive advantage. So I'm looking for things. If we get back to your earlier question of what am I looking for, I'm looking for a bunch of characteristics which lead me more to deep tech, AI, B2B, software / enterprise, big, company to company. We don't see a lot of consumer tech here in Jerusalem, and I'm happy about that because I'm not a good consumer tech investor. So the areas that I think that I'm best at figuring out are the ones that we see most often here in Jerusalem. So I've developed analytical muscle to to be a prepared mind when I see those things, because those are the things we see. 85% of what I see is, B2B software, deep tech, AI, machine learning. So I spend most of my time reading about those fields and getting, a little more sophisticated about them. But again, I'm looking for things that have, that are addressing a major problem. So not, aspirin, not vitamin. I'm looking for, I don't have any problem with vitamin companies, but I'm just not good at analyzing them. So Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, I don't know, they're amazing companies. I never would have invested in any of them because I didn't think the world needed them. It doesn't mean that they can't be incredibly successful. I'm just not good at analyzing them. So thankfully, we don't see a lot of that in Jerusalem. But when I do, I just say to them, hey, this isn't for me. Like, it's not something that I'm good at figuring out, and it's just too risky for me. So huge problem that is present or in the near term. For some reason, the current solutions to that problem are grossly inadequate or non-existent. There's just nothing close to solving that problem. And then number 3 is these 2 or 3 entrepreneurs have some crazy new approach that is radically differentiated, very defensible if it works, either through IP or just because it's just so complicated or unique that no one's going to be able to figure out how the magic works until they get traction. And those are the big 3 on the product and market side. And then the next 2 analytical pieces are analyzing the team. Do they have the subjective and objective characteristics to make it in this crazy startup world? And that takes a lot of time to evaluate, but that's, that's like the 5-part approach.
Reliability is something that you are looking for, I assume, no? Because everything is like a family. I see that your VC is more, there is more emphasis on this, no?
On like reliability and trust?
Yes, looking for partnership, not just...
for sure.
And about, if someone say, Ben, I didn't know that Jerusalem is very interesting and there is something that happening here. I want to move to Jerusalem if you're investing in.
So I get that a lot. I laugh when you say it, and I laugh when I get it, because that's not what I'm trying to do. I get misunderstood a lot. I'm not trying to convince anybody to move here.
No, we say no, not from this. He's not saying this from the side that you want your money. He's saying this because you said that I didn't know that there is something in Jerusalem. But when you say this, I see that there is something there, and I want to come there.
It's happened before. There was a company here where the entrepreneur was from Tel Aviv, and the startup was not working for him in Tel Aviv, and he moved the startup here to Jerusalem, specifically, in his case, specifically because he needed a lot of English-speaking employees. And he found that it was much easier to hire and keep people in his company in Jerusalem than it was in Tel Aviv, that's a very unusual case. And I would not evangelize people to move here to start their startup. I would evangelize people to invest in the crazy startups that are already here. It's a very different pitch. What I'm saying to entrepreneurs are, if you are in Jerusalem and you are infected with the virus called entrepreneurship that makes us all, that I have as well, I'm infected with the same virus. And that virus causes us to do things that are irrationally risky, but if they work, they're incredibly valuable. So if I don't want to convince, I don't want to, God forbid, do I want to infect anybody with that virus? Like when my own kids say, you know, oh, I want to start a startup. I want to start a startup when I grow up. I'm like, you can, but you need to tell me what problem you're trying to solve and why you believe that you have the ability to conquer it, because it's irrationally risky to try to do that. And they say, well, don't you support startups? I'm like, yeah, of course I support the people who are infected with the virus, like me, in the rare cases where I believe what they believe, and we both believe that this is the one that has a better chance of succeeding, even though most startups don't succeed. So if you are infected with that virus and you live in Jerusalem, I want to talk to you. But I am not trying to infect anybody else with that virus and try to get them to move to Jerusalem. It's the opposite. I'm trying to say, if you're already here and you're already like me, have this crazy dream about something that is unusual, I want to hear about it. And it could be that we will match and I will be the right investor for you. So it's different than trying to bring people to Jerusalem to start a company. It's more about, if you're already here, I want to be the one that you talk to try to help you get out of the jungle and get into traction.
So the answer actually is no. Yes. You
What's
need to be in Jerusalem, and then we will talk.
Yeah, I do get.
But you're not connect the things.
Yeah, I mean the JumpSpeed website says all over it, we only invest in startups that are from Jerusalem. I still get pings from founders all over the world, and certainly from Tel Aviv, who just don't bother. I don't want to put down founders. I have a lot of respect for founders, but like, don't reach out to an investor without spending. If you want an investor to spend the next 8 years or 10 years or 12 years invested in your company, take 8 seconds or 12 seconds or a minute to like look up that investor and see if they're the right investor for you, because we put out material, all of us, almost all of us, have websites or LinkedIn's
Do deep research
that say very clearly, do deep research with ChatGPT, like, you know, who are the right investors for what I'm doing. So if an investor reaches out to me from Paraguay and says, I'd like to show you my company, they clearly didn't even take 1 second to look at our website and realize that we're based in Jerusalem, Israel, and we only invest in Jerusalem companies. But even Tel Aviv entrepreneurs will sometimes reach out to me, and I realize, okay, they didn't spend any time researching me, but I try to be polite. I write back to them and say, excuse me, you know, I don't invest in Tel Aviv companies. I have a weird thesis. I only invest in Jerusalem entrepreneurs. So one of them wrote back, the best response I ever got. So I get a lot of them writing back saying, well, we're open to moving to Jerusalem. Okay, that's not the way it works. It's not what I'm trying to do. And one of them wrote back, okay, I get what you do. How about this? My great-grandfather, I live in Tel Aviv, and the company's based in Tel Aviv. My great-grandfather was the mayor of Jerusalem. So this must have been before Teddy Kollek. Like, it must have been, 100 years ago. And I wrote back to him, that is amazing. But no, like, not good enough. So you get a lot of people saying, I grew up in Jerusalem, I studied in Jerusalem, but now I'm based in, Rishon or Tel Aviv. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to invest in the crazy people that are infected with the virus, that are in Jerusalem.
You said that you are the first Czech, so it should be someone that grew up in Jerusalem. There is no way that someone will come outside of Jerusalem, say that I love Jerusalem, and then, hey, there is a band. I will send the pitch deck. It should be someone that grew up in Jerusalem, yes?
They don't have to grow up in Jerusalem. They just have to be in Jerusalem right now.
Yeah, you need to live there.
There are plenty of people that just, Talia Cohen-Solal, Dr. Talia Cohen-Solal, whose company in NeuroCare I'm very privileged to be an investor in, she had just made Aliyah probably the year before she started the company. She was right off the boat. She was living here in Jerusalem. She started the company, and I was fortunate to meet her. She hadn't grown up here. She grew up in England, but she was here. She was based here. When she started the company, she was here. And I felt that was exactly what I was looking for. Meaning I don't need her to grow up in Jerusalem. I need the company to right now be a product of the Jerusalem ecosystem. So if she started the company 6 months ago and she landed here a year ago, that's completely eligible for jump speed, and I'm very privileged that we were able to invest in that one.
Okay. If we're looking about jump speed 10 years from now, so we're looking for, I don't know, VC of $1 billion, something like this?
No, I don't think there's any chance. I don't think that that's what I want to do. I would love to return $1 billion to my investors, but I don't want to be managing $1 billion. I think it's way too much money to deploy into the ecosystem that we have here. I don't.
So what you are looking, how you see this jump speed 10 years from now?
It's hard to look 10 years from now. I try to look, maybe 5 years from now. I would love to be able to do exactly the same thing that I do today, which is finding, that 1% of Jerusalem founders that match with my investment thesis. And if that's, 2 or 3 or 4 a year, or if that's 5 or 10 a year, maybe I would need, $100 million fund instead of a 50 or a $40 million fund instead of a $20 million fund. I don't see, with all due respect to Jerusalem, I just don't see $1 billion a year investment opportunity in early stage in this one city. That would be a dream. So I don't think that there's any interest in me raising, even if I could, hundreds of millions of dollars. I think that would distract me from doing what I think I'm put on this earth to do, which is find a couple of great early stage startups and.
But you do want to do $50 million every couple of years?
Yeah, I think 40, 50 would be the max that I would ever try to raise. I think for this thesis, unless I changed direction. If I tried to do something else, then I would need a different amount of capital. But I don't want to change direction anytime soon. I hope I don't have to. I see enough opportunity here. I envision and hope that there will continue to be, it's been 12 years, it's been almost exactly the same, a couple hundred opportunities a year in Jerusalem in which I invest in 1%. I don't see that stopping anytime soon because the deal flow comes from so many different directions within Jerusalem. It's not like there's one catalyst that's causing that to happen. There's universities, there's the Michlalo, there's accelerator programs, there's Olim, there's all sorts of different things happening that cause people to have that crazy idea to start a startup. And so it's coming from multiple directions. It's not being driven by any government, initiative. It's coming from the ground up, from people that are super interesting that live in this city. And I hope that will continue for many years. And I would like to still be the go-to early stage investor for 1% of them.
Mm-hmm. And last question for some entrepreneur that now starting with the two pepperland dogs.
Yeah.
And what is the most valuable tip that you can give them?
I would give them a few tips. Number one, I would say they should, and people get really annoyed when I say this, but it changed my life. I think they should read a lot. I think we're very busy people, and reading sounds like so stupid. Like we live in the age of information where it's flying so fast. I'm a different person because I started to read when I became a VC. I wasn't a big reader from law school into my 40s when I launched JumpSpeed. I started to read by necessity because I made a lot of bad decisions when I started, but I made more good decisions. And one of the good decisions I made was, or the realization I had was that I couldn't trust my own, even if investors trusted me with their money, I couldn't trust my own intuition. I knew that I was intelligent, but I knew that I didn't know enough about decision making in the specific narrow world of VC, and therefore that drove me to just start to read as much as I could, as quickly as I could, from much smarter people who were publishing and had published how they made decisions. And that initial seed of just, I need to solve this one issue of figuring out how to make decisions, and I need to read other people's ideas about this, that became addictive. And I just started to read like crazy because I found that it was almost like a superpower. The more I read, the more balanced I became as a human, the better decisions I was making. And I can't evangelize enough. And of course I was very busy. I would make time in my day purposely to have like reading time. And it sounds so silly. And it's so incredibly powerful. So that's to solve this one issue of figuring out how to make decisions. And I need to read other people's
ideas about this, that became addictive. And I just started to read like crazy because I found that it was almost like a superpower. The more I read, even if, the more balanced I became as a human, the better decisions I was making. And I can't evangelize enough. And of course I was very busy. I would make time in my day purposely to have like reading time. And it sounds so silly and it's so incredibly powerful. So that's the reason why when people ask me for my advice, I say that first, because it's not what they usually hear. And I just can't overemphasize how much of a superpower it is. So read whatever is relevant to your space initially. Just try to find anything intelligent that people have written about it, because it's going to make you a stronger entrepreneur. It's going to make you a stronger thinker. It's going to make you a stronger human being. So number one is read a lot. Don't rely on what's between your two ears. Even if you're very, very smart, it's not going to be enough to succeed. There's a lot of free wisdom out there, or pay for a book.
זהו חכם הלומד מכל אדם.
Absolutely. And I know what it did to me. And I wouldn't be here talking to you. I would not be here talking to you. You would not know who I am if I had not read. And I can give you 50 different things that I read that enabled me to have this conversation with you. And if you had met me 12 years ago, I would not be able to speak about startups and investment the way I can speak today. I would not have been able to raise $50+ million for my fund. I would have been dead in the water and nobody would have heard of me or Jump Speed. It was not because I was so talented. It was, and I'm not being falsely humble. It was because I had basic talent and basic intelligence and supplemented that and unlocked my potential by stealing wisdom from the smartest people in the world who had written about my space. And the cool thing is I've gotten to know some of them. Like some of them, you write them a fan mail or something, they have no idea who you are and they don't answer you. But some of these luminaries have become like real friends of mine and even investors in my companies. And it all came out of a sincere like gratitude of just reaching out to them or meeting them and saying, hey, you have no idea who I am, but like you've changed my life and you've made me a better person through your writing and a better investor. I remember the famous Ben Horowitz from Andreessen Horowitz, he's a god. He comes to Israel about once a year. He used to, at least. And it's like he's like a rock star. He's surrounded by people. So I was invited to an event where he spoke. I was just in the back room. He had no idea who I was. I'd never been in touch with him. Why would I be in touch with him? He's a god. He's a giant. But I had read a bunch of his things, and I quote him all the time in my lectures when I speak. And I could cite to you different pieces of things that he said that became part of the shablona, or the mosaic of like how I invest. I have deep gratitude to him, even though he's never met me. I just have this deep gratitude for him making me a better thinker and a better decision maker. Anyway, so he speaks in this, big event in Tel Aviv, and he gets off the stage and everybody, mobs Ben Horowitz, and his wife is standing next to him. His wife came with him on the trip, and he's probably had a bodyguard. Like he's just that kind of celebrity. And as he worked his way down the crowd, everyone's yelling at him, hey, how can I be in touch with you? And how can I pitch you? And he's like, just overwhelmed by it, which he gets everywhere he goes, probably. He just passed by, and I don't know how I got his attention, but I said, Ben, hey, I just want to say thank you. He looked at me. His wife looked at me. He said, what? I said, you don't know who I am, but I'm an investor in Jerusalem. And I've read your book. I've read your blogs. A bunch of different things that you've done and written have made me a stronger investor. And I'm just deeply grateful to you. The whole crowd stopped. His wife stopped. She's looking at me. She goes, that's so nice of you. And he reaches into his pocket, takes out his business card, which people still had back then, hands me his card and says, thank you so much. That's really, really nice. Be in touch if you ever need anything. And everyone's looking around, how did you do that? Like, everyone else was trying to get something from him. I actually was not trying to get anything from him. I just literally just wanted to say thank you. But it's just such a powerful message for hakarat tov and gratitude and finding your mentors who you don't even know teach you things. So that's a very long answer to your question. The short answer to your question is, number one, if I sat with somebody and they asked me for a tip, I would say, read, identify the voices that can make you, to the order of 10 smarter. They're out there. And don't rely on your own brain. It's not enough. There's tons of information out there that can help get you smarter. Find it and get it. That's number one. Number two, what I would say to founders is understand how to tell your story. The world is not going to bow down to the piece of technology that you made. 99 times out of 100, you're going to need to push it into the world and attract their attention. Once in a while, somebody launches something into the world and it takes off like crazy, but it's probably not going to be you. So you have to learn how to explain what you're doing very quickly and very clearly to people who don't care, like investors, like customers. We actually don't care. We actually like the status quo. Even those of us who are in venture capital, who claim that we're in the business of investing in new startups, we only do it like 1 or 2% of the time. We're saying no 98% of the time. So understand that you're going up against, like it's a Sisyphean kind of task where you're lifting that rock up the hill all the time. And you have to learn what it takes to get past the no and past the skepticism. In order to do that, you're going to have to tell a very clear story very quickly. Most people are not going to give you the benefit of the doubt or they're even the people that are in the business of hearing your pitch know that 98% of the time they're going to say no. So they're going to just be red flagging and blocking when you say something. You have to learn how to get past that and neutralize their objections and keep them interested. It's a skill, but it can be learned by anybody. You don't have to be dynamic. You don't have to be a great speaker.
You need to write in the AI and it will help you.
I don't believe in using AI to do it. I think you have to know your story in your heart.
Yes, but not everyone knows to organize a story. Yes,
well, I published a bunch of stuff to try to help people organize it. I've spent years researching it, and I put out all sorts of free material and a book that is number one.
It's called Heart, yes.
What's that? It's called Heart of the Perfect Pitch, and the book is called Fever Pitch. And I spent a lot of time working on that because I wanted to help. I felt it helped me and it helped my founders in my portfolio. And I just wanted to share it with other entrepreneurs, like make it easier for us as investors. Speak to us the way our brains work. And it's going to help you connect with your eventual financial partner. Like, it's there for all of us. And we've been speaking this way. I'm not making something up. I'm just translating a framework that we've been using as humans since we were in the caves. Like we followed the people when we were cavemen and cavewomen. We followed the leaders who could explain to us clearly where the woolly mammoth was, where the saber-toothed tiger was hiding, and why we needed to move our camp to the next camp. And if they couldn't explain that clearly, we didn't follow them and everybody died. So evolutionarily, we've evolved as humans to tell things a certain way and to listen for things a certain way. I'm just translating that into startup land and saying, our caveman and cavewomen, and many VCs are like cavemen and cavewomen. So speak to us the way our brains work. We're looking for stories in a certain structure, and those are the things that we respond to in the rest of our lives. Let's do that in the startup world as well. So I think those are the two things: read and learn how to get the story structured right. So it's the same pitch, it's the same technology, it's the same team, but you're pitching it in a way that resonates with the investor's brain and neutralizes the objections as they come up or even before they come up, and will give you a better chance of connecting with the person who's going to hopefully give you the next money that you need to succeed.
Mm-hmm. I will do a summary. Everything is going to איזה הוא חכם, הלא ואני כל אדם. I think that is something that very characterize you.
Yep.
Thank you. I think that this will be very, very valuable for entrepreneurs.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate the time.